Hello, you're watching Special Dialogue here on TVRI World. We're coming to you from the capital, Jakarta, Indonesia. I'm Rahmat Idris. Towards the end of this year, two very important, highly prestigious events of summits will take place mainly in the region of Latin America. First, to take place in just a matter of days from now, is the leaders' meeting or the summit of the so-called Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperations or Apec Leaders Meeting Summits to be held in Lima, Peru from the 13th to the 16th of November 2024, to be followed a couple of days later by the highly esteemed G20 summit that Indonesia is a part of, to be held also in Latin America, to be precise, in the city of Rio de Janeiro, the capital of Brazil. And the newly inaugurated President of the Republic of Indonesia, His Excellency Prabowo Subianto, will be attending in person, single-handedly helping navigate the discussions and asserting influence from Indonesia, and also shaping the discussions on the tables of these summits. We are here today for this special dialogue to sort of unpeel the layers of what to expect from Indonesia's participations for these two esteemed summits over in Peru and also in Brazil. And I'm extremely honored to be joined by two very esteemed guests for the special dialogue today. With me on my right side is the Deputy Speaker of People's Consultative Assembly of the Republic of Indonesia, Mr. Edi Suparno. A very good day to you, Mr. Edi.
Thank you so much for having me. A very good day to you.
Thank you very much for joining us and making the time for TVR and World. And completing our conversation today on the other end of the table is the Deputy Executive Director for Research of CSIS, Safia Muhibat. Fifi, always a pleasure to see you. Thank you again for joining us.
Always happy to be here.
Before we begin this conversation, ladies and gentlemen, would like to give you the highlights of what to expect for the upcoming G20 and Apec summits attended by our president. Take a look at this visual. Peru will host the annual Apec Leaders Meeting on November 13 to 16 in Lima, against a backdrop of a stagnating economic integration in the ASEAN region, rising protectionism, geopolitical tensions, and an uncertain economic growth outlook. The meeting is an opportunity for the world leaders to meet bilaterally and address the regional business community through the CEO Summit, which precedes it. APEC meeting in Peru 2024 will be the first APEC meeting for a number of world leaders, including Indonesian President Prabowo Subianto, New Zealand Prime Minister Christopher Luxon, Singaporean Prime Minister Lawrence Wong, and Thai Prime Minister Petoran Sinawat. For the Indonesian President Prabowo, the APEC meeting in Peru will be quite important, as he would be able to not only because as new president, he will have an opportunity to get to know other world leaders as well as to attract multinational companies to invest in Indonesia. The Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperations or APEC Forum, established in November 1989, is an economic forum composed of 21 Asia-Pacific economies, considered the most dynamic region in the world. Indonesia is one of active members of the organization. Indonesia twice hosted the APEC Summit. First was held in the Bogor Palace in Bogor, West Java on November 15 and 16, 1994, when the government was under then-President Suharto. And then the second one was held in Bali on October the 5th to the 7th, 2013, under President Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono. APEC leaders concluded their meeting in Bali by issuing a declaration under the theme Resilient Asia-Pacific, Engine of Global Growth. The G20, which started in response to the Asian financial meltdown of the late 1990s and was later elevated to a leaders summit after the global financial crisis in 2008, has evolved from being a talk shop to the political and economic steering committee for the world. Brazil will host the next Leaders Summit on November 18 to 19, 2024 in Rio de Janeiro, with the presence of the leaders of the 19 member countries, plus the African Union and the European Union. Brazil took over G20 presidency from India in November 2023 and will then pass the baton to South Africa.
Indonesia hosted the G20 summit in Nusa Dua, Bali on November 15 and 16, 2022. During the Indonesian G20 presidency in 2022, the war in Ukraine had started affecting global food security, an issue that Indonesia pushed as a priority along with advocating for resilient global health systems in the wake of the pandemic. At the conclusion of the Bali summit, the then President Joko Widodo unveiled several concrete achievements from the gathering that included, among others, pandemic fund establishment, the launch of the Resilience and Sustainability Trust under the International Monetary Fund, amounting to $81.6 billion to help countries in crisis. Meanwhile, India, for its part, took up inclusive digital infrastructure, an area in which it has found success through homegrown solutions and which it has offered to share with other developing countries, along with the reform of multilateral development banks and international institutions to scale up financing for climate and other global development challenges.
Well, there you have it, a glimpse of the leaders' meeting of Apec and also the G20 summits over the years in many countries. Let's go over to our guests for the conversation now. First, over to you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. It is highly interesting with the fact that the newly inaugurated President Prabowo Subianto has a lot on his tables and now is attending all of these important meetings overseas. Yeah. What will be the main objectives, the main missions that the government of Indonesia, through our presidents, will be presenting on the tables of, first, the APEC leaders meetings for the summit?
The way I see it, Pak Prabowo, as our newly sworn-in president, will continue to enhance economic cooperation as well as promote regional stability. But he will also, as CEO of Indonesia Inc., will also act as Chief Marketing Officer of Indonesia Inc. to promote investments into Indonesia, to promote a positive and conducive investment climate for potential investors to come in Indonesia, especially to develop the sustainable economic sector. So we're talking about renewable energy, we're talking about critical minerals in the renewable space, as well as other sustainable economic activities that we are trying to promote and increase in terms of investments. We understand that Indonesia's economy has been basically dependent on consumer activities. And as of today, if we plan to increase our economic growth to 7 or 8%, exhausting taxes, exhausting consumer activities is something that has somewhat reached its limit. So we should focus on two things: foreign direct investments and exports. So I think these are two key agendas that Pak Prabowo will bring to the table during his presence at the APEC summit.
Right. In your opinions, over the years that since we've become the members and a part of the highly prestigious organization's entity of Apec, deputy speakers, how much of it has helped shape Indonesia's economy? And as you mentioned, also help us expand our market outreach and also promote investments coming into Indonesia? Well,
APEC is a very huge market. And this is a market where cooperation should be the base of our future cooperation between APEC members. But we have seen especially during COVID and post-COVID, markets have sort of been looking inwards, simply to secure supply and secure domestic food products, domestic energy for domestic markets. And this is something that we are trying to enhance in terms of reopening markets, because trade within the APEC countries is very instrumental. And we should also address the digital divide between countries within APEC. And this is something that we can actually work and enhance together, especially if we look at cooperation from Apec countries with advanced economies, especially in the renewable energy space, as I mentioned before, in global trade, in the global supply chain. So this is something that I think countries like Indonesia can also capitalize and can also contribute to be part of the entire global sustainability chain going forward.
Right. And digitalizations and advanced technology are certainly keys to this growth. I'd like to go over to you, Mbafifi, before we go to a quick break. Just walk us through the main essence of APEC, the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation as an entity, and its contributions to helping out the economic affairs, shape economic affairs within the region of Asia-Pacific.
Sure. I mean, APEC, in essence, basically, you know what, at least from the Indonesian point of view, it's all about, you know, economic growth, regional stability, and most of all, multilateralism and the way to get there. And I think these are some of the issues that Indonesia will continue to pursue, you know, this year's summit and also in the next following years. But I think, you know, as of recent, there are more and more things to be added to these existing objectives in APEC. So, for example, for us, trade expansion is something to be considered, definitely. We talked about digital innovation. Definitely, that's something that Indonesia would like also to pursue through APEC. And one more thing is also about climate and sustainability. There is also something that the new issue that APEC is also will take that as one of the focus in this year's summit.
So in a sense, it has expanded beyond only economic affairs and cooperation.
Absolutely.
Right. We'll dive deeper into this topic, ladies and gentlemen, in just a few minutes as we take a short break now for the special dialogue. Do join us in just a few minutes. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the special dialogue here on TV Our World. We are still deep in conversations on the Indonesia's stance on APEC and the G20 summits coming in just a couple of days from now as we speak. And I'm still joined by Deputy Speaker of People's Consultative Assembly of the Republic of Indonesia, Mr. Eri. You mentioned very briefly there the targets that has also been mentioned. I mean, you echoed, Mr. President, essentially there. We are aiming for, if not 6, 7 to 8% economic growth in the country. What is the role of APEC, in your opinions, which will be attended by Mr. President himself, in helping us achieve the trajectory towards these numbers?
I believe one of the key components is remaining markets open, close coordination between APEC countries, encouraging inflows of investments. Through inflows of investments, obviously, we will enhance our manufacturing base. We will enhance Indonesia's downstreaming industry base, and that will create jobs, will enhance our manufacturing capabilities. And Indonesia has traditionally been an open market for imports. We have always been a market, but we have never transformed ourselves to become a base for exports. This is something that we should be looking forward to going forward. And Pak Prabowo, in his aim, in his objective to reach a 7 to 8% economic growth rate, I think with the enhancement of our industrial manufacturing-based downstreaming industries, that target is somewhat achievable in the near future.
Right. Although what's been making headlines lately is the ministers being gathered by our presidents, now that we are only at 4.95 as we speak right now. So there's a humongous undertaking in the coming future to reach these numbers, Mr. Eri. But on that note, though, you mentioned also how we have been so reliant on import these days,
Yes.
meaning that we have a huge undertaking to elevate our exports. And in that sense, this brings another matter, because a lot of these free trade agreements that have come up from APEC have also impacted the level of imports coming in. We have massive, even uncontrollable imports, sometimes without surveillance that's happening under the table. And that has been hampering, as you say, our manufacturers, which is something that we need to develop. How do we find the exact balance of, if not balance, a surplus to exports and controlling more of imports coming in as a result of the agreements from APEC?
Yeah, well, enhancing supervision and digitalization of the authorities that control imports into Indonesia, basically the taxes that needs to be imposed have to be imposed, and they have to be identified. Well, we have a problem in the various incoming borders of goods into Indonesia.
This is a vast country.
It is a very huge country, and issues can be such that imports can be stagnated in the ports if digitalization is not enhanced. So this is very important to us. Secondly, we are part of APEC. We are part of a member of free trade agreements. So based on these agreements, we cannot avoid imports of goods and services into Indonesia. But what we can actually identify, if there are dumping practices where we have to impose anti-dumping mechanisms, that need to be imposed, and that needs to be imposed fairly quickly, and that needs to be enhanced via G2G discussions, so that the implementation of these measures can be facilitated in a quick and efficient manner.
Right. Over to you, Ms. Fifi. Over the years since the membership of Indonesia within the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation, how, in your overall analysis, has it benefited Indonesia as a growing economy?
Well, definitely he has had a lot of benefits for Indonesia. Indonesia is we're the kind of country that we depend much on our multilateral engagements. Multilateral forums like APEC is definitely something that is very important for us. Again, it opens up market, access to market, trade liberalization, free trade agreements, and then it also, puts us into position where we can develop this closer engagements with the other members of APEC. So definitely, we have had a lot of benefits throughout APEC.
Right. Now, from APEC, let's move over to yet another highly anticipated summit coming in this November, Mr. Eddie, which is the G20 summit. It brings us all to the great memories of our own presidency back in 2022. This year, what are Indonesia's focus on the table of the G20 summits over in Brazil that will take place in a matter of a week from now, also presided by our president?
A few things that we need to follow up from the G20 proceedings here in Indonesia 2022, among others, is economic inclusivity, financial inclusivity. We have spoken, one of the key achievements during the G20 summit in Indonesia was the establishment of a just energy transition JTP fund in Indonesia of $20 billion. Which at this point is still in a preliminary stage where utilization of those funds to develop the renewable energy sector to address environmental issues is still not there yet. So we still need to enhance that, including reforming the financial multilateral sector to allow financings and financial assistance to countries that actually are in the process of transitioning energy from fossil to renewable energy.
The JETP, for example, has been focused solely at this point towards geothermal energy.
Geothermal is one thing. We are also talking about solar panels, solar cell farms. We're also talking about wind. We're also talking about ocean energy. So these type of the various options that we have need to be developed and need to be developed quickly. In addition, we need to also think of somewhat accelerating the early retirement of the existing coal-fired power plants.
Yeah.
But we can only do so...
Which is another difficult task for our country.
And we can only do so once we have funds available to early retire them, and we have the alternative renewable energy power systems available to replace them. Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Before we go to a quick break, I'd like to go over to you about the G20. We remember precisely back in December 2022, the two of us, only the two of us, for many hours here, kicking off the G20 presidency, one of the early broadcasts of TV Our World. Fifi, thank you so much for those memories. Now, fast forward to 2024. Now it is under Brazil. How much has it improved, Fifi, in terms of addressing the current global challenges within the G20 member states, which are some of the biggest economies in the world?
Well, I guess, 2 years forward, there are new challenges to be faced,
exactly,
even more than we faced 2 years ago. And I do think that, we set some priorities in 2022 during Indonesia's presidency. And I do think that Indonesia will continue to advocate some of the priorities that we had 2 years ago coming into this year's summit in Brazil. And this includes, issues like strengthening global economic stability. Pak Eddie mentioned about, green transition. I think that is one of the main agenda that Indonesia is bringing forward to this year's summit as well. And I do think, we are still, we're 2 years ahead from the pandemic. And I do think that we are still also bringing into the agenda issues that address the long-term economic impacts of the pandemic still. And I think G20 is one of the right platforms to actually discuss some of these things.
Well, the pandemic itself is a reeling impact that we are still recovering up to this point, and it's still another big homework for the G20 members. We'll continue on that topic of the G20 in just a few minutes when we return for the continuations of Special Dialogue here on TV Our World. We will be right back. Well, thank you for still joining us on this very special dialogue here on TV Our World, coming to you from Jakarta, Indonesia. We're deep in the discussions of Indonesia's stance on the upcoming Apec and G20 summits. Over to you again, Deputy Speaker. Mr. Eddie, you touched very lightly there on the renewable energy and our efforts towards a more sustainable industry here in Indonesia. But also one of the main pillars, if I remember correctly from our presidency, was the health transformation and digital transformations. Where are we at with that within the G20 summit? And have we done enough in terms of making all of these transformations 2 years now that we are into the Brazil's presidency?
Yes, I think enhancing health resiliency among G20 countries is something that is also a key focus for us. We have voiced out our opinion to establish a global fund for health emergencies post-COVID.
Not that we expect another pandemic to approach, right? So, but just in that case.
Yeah, it's better to be safe than sorry, obviously.
Prepared, exactly.
And this is something that we are also trying to push forward, so that countries that need assistance in terms of any upcoming pandemic will be well serviced by this fund. So this is something that we're also pushing forward. Obviously, we are also trying to, on top of that, in addition to that, we're also trying to promote, as I had mentioned before, regional stability. Indonesia, as a member of the non-aligned movements, we are trying to always paddle through in between two rocks, the US and China, obviously, and we maintain excellent relationships, economic, political, social relationships with both countries, and we look forward to doing so going forward.
Right, right. And just to echo what you just said, Mbak Fifi, that times have changed. Topics have shifted on the tables of the G20 from our experience. I mean, we've had India in the middle of our presidency to Brazil right now. I mean, even though what we had during our presidency was quite challenging. We just came out of the pandemic. The Ukraine and Russia conflict has just started, and the topic of food security has been right there front and center. But also, Brazil takes its own stance in terms of addressing the challenges. Let me just see what they have for that. It's the hunger, poverty, and inequality, which is in a sense, resemble the veins of our very own presidency. How much progress have we made addressing these challenges from your analysis?
It's actually quite interesting to see some of the overlaps that this year's theme in Brazil overlaps with what we had 2022. Issues like, and they even expanded a little bit more because the newer challenges that we talked about, issues like inclusive growth, sustainability, we talked about digital transformation, and then also, strengthening global cooperation with regards to looking at the current geopolitics dynamics. And I think looking at these overlaps, it shows that there are continuation from years and years of G20.
The wordings changed a bit, but the essence is there.
Exactly. And then the essence is there. The wordings change, but also taking into account the newer challenges that exist at this moment. But it's great to see that this serious continuation of what has been discussed throughout the years.
Right. So hunger and poverty is echoed in Indonesia, while India echoed our digital transformations. Back over to you again, Mr. Eddie, because one of the main objectives, not only during his campaign, but right after he was sworn in, President Prabowo Subianto, is that to sort of have Indonesia's more prominent stance, or rather presence, in global communities. And now he's actively taking part in the earlier time after his sworn into office, the Apec and the G20 summits, hopefully someday down the line for the General Assembly of the United Nations, hopefully. Do you think that, what is the most ideal approach and strategy of our newly sworn in president here in terms of getting to the point where we have a more influential presence in global community, assert our influence and make a change in the world?
Well, one of the key tasks that Pak Prabowo has at hand, and he has committed to promoting regional stability. And as a result, we, Indonesia, have also offered our helping hand to undertake and mediate regional conflicts.
You mentioned the South China Sea.
South China Sea, in the Middle East even.
Taiwan Strait, even Middle East. You mentioned that over and over again.
Yes.
Support
so this is something that is projected to enhance our leadership in overcoming regional conflict. And Indonesia has in the past demonstrated successfully that Indonesia is a very effective mediator when it comes to settling regional conflicts, as we had we've demonstrated that in Aceh, but we also demonstrated that in other countries, especially in the Middle East. And this is something that we can replicate, and I think our credibility to resolve regional conflicts is such that countries have even extended their hands for Indonesia's assistance to solve their regional issues.
Right. Essentially, what Mr. Prabowo Subianto will be delivering at the summit of the G20 is the result of the discussions from the working groups, from the ministerial level, something that have been involving all of these elements prior to his presence at the G20 summit. Have you received any inside words, any substances to the potential communique or leaders' declarations that may come up later from Rio de Janeiro, Mr. Deputy Speaker?
We're looking at economic inclusivity. We're looking at economic growth, which is based on sustainable economic growth. And we're looking at a just economic development. So no one is left behind. This is something, this is a key issue. And we're looking at greater cooperation between countries, between the G20 countries in particular, and to resolve any political differences that we have at an early stage, not to affect our diplomatic relationships, our friendly relationships with all the countries. And Indonesia, as a non-aligned member country, will remain non-aligned. We'll remain neutral, and we'll take a proactive stance in assisting resolving any issues that countries may have in the future.
Yeah. And I guess it goes without saying that everybody at this point expect for the war to stop.
Well, it is better to be friends with 1,000 friends.
Yeah.
It is never enough than having just one
enemy.
Is
too many.
It's too much.
One is too many.
Yes.
Lastly, before we close the program, to you, Mbak Fifi, what can we expect as the main outcome from the G20 summit this year, including Apec as well, if you want to put that into account? Now that we have our President Prabowo Subianto, attending the event in person, will we reach the highly elusive leaders' declarations or communiques, something that actually came to fruition during our presidency? Out of this world, I was actually bawling in tears due to happiness. What can we expect from Rio de Janeiro's
I think this time around, it's safe to say that we can expect that. But I think one thing that we need to remember again, that Indonesia's presidency 2 years ago was the start of G20 presidency by developing countries. So Indonesia, India, and now Brazil. So basically, we are the voices of the developing world. So what is more important, I think, hopefully in the leaders' declaration, there will be more voices of these developing nations, our concerns, our interests that is put there in the declaration, so that it's become a priority for all the G20 members.
And hopefully someday down the line, all the developing member nations will become developed member states of the G20, and we are out of the middle income trap. And with having said that, we have come to the end of our conversations. There's not enough time for these exciting topics. I have to express my deepest gratitude and appreciations to the Deputy Speaker of People's Consultative Assembly of the Republic of Indonesia, His Excellency Mr. Edi Suparno.
Thank
and
you
on
so
the
much.
other side of the conversations, Deputy Executive Director for Research of CSIS, Shafia Muhibat. Thank you both very much for your insight and time.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Thank you.
And that concludes our special dialogue here on TVR World. From Jakarta, Indonesia, I'm Rahmat Idris. Thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye.